My name's Bob Darrell, and I am an alcoholic. Only through the grace of a God that I was afraid to believe in, that I found out through the steps, is crazy about me and has no taste. Good sponsorship and a persistent and consistent commitment to the primary purpose of helping other alcoholics. I haven't had a drink or any mind or emotion-altering substance since Halloween 1978. For that, I owe you my life and my freedom. That's all right. Applaud AA if you want. Don't applaud me. I can show you what I did with my life before I got to you. It wasn't good. Chuck was up here and he was having trouble with the microphone. It kept twisting. I kept thinking, someone told me once that microphones take on the personality of the person who uses them. I want to thank Lee for and John and and I know there's a whole gaggle of people involved in putting this thing on. And just for those who need to know, this is the second Woodstock of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to throw, because I could not say that. I'm just that way. I am really delighted to be here. There's a lot of what I am today and how I've connected the dots in Alcoholics Anonymous with the program and myself have come from people that are in this room today, this weekend. From listening to them, I've found me. And I've found a lot of stuff I've found in AA, and I think that's how we do it here. Nobody can tell us anything. We listen to people talk about themselves, and the lights go on, and we make those connections. And there's a lot of people in this room that have helped me to find myself in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if there's anything I can bring to bear, it's probably a combination of what I found in AA and what I found in other people's experience that I passes through me. This is like a passing the baton in the biggest cosmic relay race. I mean, just here, and it goes through us. I want to read something out of the 12 by 12. I'll start out with this. I was frantically trying to find it. I call it the 12 by 12. Somebody always says something. It's not the 12 by 12. It's the 12 and 12. Well, I got in the habit of saying that 30 years ago because that's what I was told that I would frame my life with the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And then it gets depth and dimensional when I add the concepts and get into service. This is a paragraph that really talks about my primary problem once I get sober. It's from page 53 of the 12 and 12. It says it's from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact is that we fail to recognize is the total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too, and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, they revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. We have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we have tried to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. I wish that was only true. I wish that kind of just stopped as when you stop drinking. Alcoholism's a lonely business. And in my experience, it's lonelier when you stop drinking. At least alcohol, there's a line in our literature that says at one time it allowed us to act extemporaneously. That means I could come out. I could become external. I could get free of this prison up in here. And then in the last days of drinking, it doesn't work like that anymore. And the countless futile attempts to become extemporaneous, the countless futile attempts to get free, and I can't. And that's when our book, A Vision for You, says we will know loneliness such as few do. I heard Chamberlain years ago say that alcoholism was a disease of separation. And when he said that, it just hit me because I always had feelings of being separate and apart from. I always had feelings of not fitting. I've always had this sense of an invisible yet impenetrable barrier between me and life itself. That I could not, on my own, sober, break through. Now, there was a time when 5 shots of whiskey and the barrier would just dissolve and I'd come out, I was free. I was a free man. But so I'd get sober again and I'd always be kind of locked up inside of me. Which, oddly enough, I'll tell you a little story. I know Tom has had this experience, and there's a lot of people in this room. Occasionally, maybe once every year or so, I go to a prison in Central Coast of California that's a supermax prison. And this is where most of the lifers end up. And there's a huge AA group in there, 150 guys, I guess, and they have like a line of greeters, and there's an energy in that room that is amazing. And you have guys that are lifers that will never, ever get out of prison, and they're sponsoring guys, and they are freer. I'm telling you, they're freer than guys I sit on the outside with that are free to walk around the earth. They're freer. Because freedom is really, there's only one thing that I ever have to be free from, and that's the bondage of self. I drank for it. I do AA for it. It is essential to who and what I am to be free. Because I know what it's like to be abstinent and locked up. And I'll tell you something, it's no wonder that I go back to drinking. Eventually. And I go back to drinking with a desperate hope of busting out, of getting free. Years ago, I was at a meeting. I was pretty new, maybe in my first year. And some people I ended up going to this 12 and 12 meeting, and they were on the traditions, which the minute I found out that, I wanted to leave. Right? Because I don't want to, that's fine. It's the traditions to me in Alcoholics Anonymous is like the 55 mile an hour speed zone. I think it's a good idea. But I'm in a hurry here, right? And I think they should be in place for you. You people need to. So why do I think you should practice the principles? So you will maintain AA for the most important person in the universe, me, right? But personally, I like that guy in that Humphrey Bogart movie. Traditions, I don't need no stinking traditions. And I'm self-centered. I'm in the extreme. Book says we're extreme examples of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. And I don't think so. So I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and this will sound very bizarre, but this is my perception looking back. In the groups I went to, I don't even think I realized there was other people there with problems and stuff for a while. It was like when I was new, I think I thought my name was "Does anybody want to share?" Right? And I would take a whole meeting hostage, about my life and my problems. Very self-centered, very self-centered. And then what happens? Because of self-centered fear, and only because of that. This is the only place I've ever been where you took my defects of character and made them into some, and used them to help me. And because of self-centered fear and my concern with what you thought of me and what the old-timers and my sponsor thought of me, I got into service in AA. Didn't really want to. I thought it was an inconvenience. But I started to do it. And then what happened is I started to care about a couple people. A couple guys that I'd been involved with. I was on the 12-step call with them, or I had talked to them and spent a little time after a meeting in the detox, or a guy that I saw come out of the jail where I took a meeting. And you know how that thing that always starts to happen in our hearts, where somebody else becomes important to you. And then all of a sudden my world gets a little bigger. And then I started really falling in love with the people in my home group. I would to the point where if somebody wasn't there, I'd be worried. Where'd they go? Where's so and so? Now this is a guy who doesn't worry about anybody except himself, and I started to worry about people in my home group. And then I got into general service, and I started being concerned with other groups in my district, and then in my area. And then eventually I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. Is the most amazing thing. And I've been in meetings in all over the world. I mean, and it's the same thing. The magic exists everywhere we come together. But we almost didn't survive ourselves. And one of the things that I started getting into the traditions when I started getting into general service. A guy in AA said something to me that really I've thought about to this day. He said, none of this means anything until it means something to you. In other words, I have to personalize this stuff. As long as these are just some vague set of rules for you people, they really don't mean anything to me. And a guy used to say that he thought that the practicing personally of the 12 traditions in his life with relationships with people, family, work, was what allowed him to be a part of there. And for a guy who doesn't fit sober very well, that was a program of attraction for me. Because I wanted to fit. I'm everything that it talked about in that paragraph in the 12 and 12. I am all of that, sober. I don't mean to be. And I can pretend all I want. It doesn't change it. I'm the separate guy. I'm the guy where it's all of you and then there's me. And I can't will that away. The book says we can't will our self-centeredness away. We can't wish it away any more than alcohol. And I couldn't do that. And it was really in the implementation of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions in my life that I started to fit, not just in Alcoholics Anonymous, but also out in the world. I ran a company for a lot of years sober, and we had a lot of employees, and I ran the company on the 12 traditions. And they didn't know where they came from. They didn't even know they were called the 12 traditions. But in our staff meetings, we would talk about the principles. We would talk about their application. We'd talk about things like setting ourselves aside for the greater good. And you know something? I'm amazed to this day how normal, everyday people, they get all of this. You got to about kill me to open my mind up to some. And normal people, they just go, oh yeah, the whole's better than the. Oh yeah. And I don't do that. I got the great call of every alcoholic I've ever met. Yeah, that's fine, but what about me? What about me? And it starts in the steps. And I think accumulates and really comes to fruition in the traditions is where I set myself aside for a greater whole and a greater good and a greater purpose. Some of you know a little bit about the history of the traditions. I just want to talk about this real briefly because just because it's important. I don't consider myself as an historian, but in the mid-40s, mid-40s, AA was in a lot of trouble. And Bill was becoming very concerned, and through a series of coincidences, how God works through us, he discovered information about a group called the Washingtonians that he didn't even know existed. And in his concern and worry for the future of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill loved AA, and Bill loved drunks. I identify so much with Bill Wilson because Bill Wilson was very flawed. Bill Wilson was not a perfect guy at all, but he loved alcoholics. And he loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and he loved the idea of hope for generations of us. And out of that, his worry and love, I think, came this traditions, which I'll tell you something. This sounds strange, but maybe 2,000 years from now, Alcoholics Anonymous will not be known for its steps anymore. Maybe it'll be known for its traditions. You know, this to this date, science has never come up with a permanent cure or an ability to eradicate alcoholism. But now they're doing some DNA stuff, and where feasibly they could remove the things out of the species that create alcoholism. And then if that's true, the steps will become like sort of academic, very nice, but academic. There won't be people coming to the table with the desperation of dying men as we have. But maybe 1,000 years from now, the 12 traditions will be known for the most unifying force in humanity. And when Bill put these in place, when he created them, he tried to put them in place, he created the long form, which unfortunately most AA members today, the majority of people here, in AA, maybe not in this room, because this is like, the people that come to a weekend like this are very enthusiastic about AA. But across the board in meetings and clubs and around the country, most people have never even heard of the long form. But they know the short form. And the reason the short form evolved is that Bill could not get anybody excited about the long form. Matter of fact, he couldn't even get anybody to read them in meetings. I mean, you know why? You know why, right? Because they're long, right? And well, that's all good, but you're cutting into the important stuff when we could be talking about me here, right? And so Bill was very frustrated. There's even letters in our archives where groups had asked Bill to come and speak, provided that he agrees not to mention the traditions. And Bill struggled with that. And then in a desperate concession, he conceded to an abbreviated version. I've talked to a lot of people over the years. There's speculation on who wrote them. Did Bill write them? I've heard people say that they think that it was a collaboration between Tom Powers and a couple other people. I don't know. I'm not that. There may be people in this room that have more information about actually who wrote the short form of the 12 traditions than I do. But I've sensed, and I can't prove this, but I sensed Bill's reluctance. I think he really wanted to stick with the long form, and he conceded to them. Whether he conceded and wrote them himself, or he conceded to a collaboration, I don't know. But he conceded to them, and they were adopted in 1950 by the groups at the first conference in Cleveland. And they've been part of our program ever since. I've suspected at times that we took a hit by going with the short form. I think the long form has more meat. It has more substance for Alcoholics Anonymous. I think the long form keeps us more focused on what we're about. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. Maybe in the bigger picture, maybe the shorter form has opened the doors wider, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I don't know. I'm try not to have an opinion about that, even though I do. But I try not to. I want to just kind of go through the traditions, very much like the steps. They're laid out almost very similar. Step one, you define the problem. Powerless over alcohol, drunk and sober. Oh, if only my powerlessness over alcohol stopped where the bottle stopped, then there'd be no relapse in Alcoholics Anonymous. Once you really, not like the other 20 times, but once you really made up your mind, you'd be good to go. But I am powerless over its call to my spirit that gets sick, even when I'm sober. I am really powerless. And I can't manage my own life. You know how you know that? Because you tried a lot, didn't you? Oh, yeah. And the problem really is defined in the first tradition is a lack of unity. Not only is that the problem in Alcoholics Anonymous, it is the problem of the spirit of a business or a company, of a family, of an AA group, of myself, and the loneliness and separation of untreated alcoholism. The problem is that when I get sober, I don't fit anywhere. And because of that, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what you'll think of me. I'm afraid that you don't accept me. I'm afraid of all that. And I have this ego that rises up and tries to run the universe to make it right. And my making it right makes it more wrong. Always, 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 always. I guess that's the core of the reason I can't manage my own life. There's this thing about unity. There was a letter that Bill Wilson received from the great psychiatrist Carl Jung in the early 60s. And Jung said something to Wilson. I have a copy of the letter if anybody wants. It's an amazing letter. There's a lot of good stuff. But one of the things that really hit me was that he said that as a result of working with Roland Hazard and other alcoholics, that he had came to believe that the alcoholic's thirst for alcohol is not really a thirst for alcohol. He says it's a low-level thirst of the alcoholic's being for wholeness, connectedness, unity, or union with God. And I drank for that, really. I drank to be a part of. I drank not only to fit with the guys I drank with, but to feel like as if this was my planet, my home planet. Because, I used to have fantasies about flying saucers realizing that they'd left me here and coming and getting me. I never felt like I fit. That's why I love that book, Chariots of the Gods. I remember reading that in jail one time going, they left me here. This lack of unity really is the deal. In the long form, I love the way it's worded. It says that each member is but a small part of a great whole. Now that's the first inclination that I'm supposed to set myself apart or down in order to something. The whole is greater than me and more important than me. That's a big deal for self-centered people like me, to act and take that position and that angle of approach, not only in Alcoholics Anonymous, but at work. I could not become successful in work until I started to apply this principle and the principles of the traditions. My first 4 years of sobriety, I went through 9 jobs in 4 years. And I could have told, every time I either left or was fired, I could have explained it to you how it wasn't my fault. But I am the seat and the source of my separation and conflict. I am the guy. And I couldn't have told you that because my ego exists to justify itself, to explain itself, to defend itself. But I am the guy. And when I started, Chuck Chamberlain really hit me with something. When I was talking to him, he told me something, and he'd probably said it in talks before. He used to also say you can only hear what you can hear when you can hear it. And one time I talked to him after a meeting. He spoke just for a couple minutes, and he said I was getting ready to quit the 9th job I had sober. And because of them, right? And he said to me, kid, you have it all wrong. The fact that how much you're appreciated or paid or how more work you do than anybody else or all that stuff's none of your business. He said, you got to go to work for one reason and one reason only. And that's to help God's kids. And if you'll go to work to be of service and forget yourself and ask God to help you, to put you aside, he said things will change in this area. And only because I was desperate and I was scared, because I was afraid I was going to be the guy that was 30 years sober that had 30 jobs and hated every one of them. Like I could show you guys like that in AA. I was afraid I was going to be that guy. I was afraid that I was going to be an endless, forced life of going to work and feeling like I'm doing time there and hating it. And only because of that was my mind was open to what Chuck said. And I started to try to put myself aside, and I'd ask God to help me to go to work, forget myself, and go to work every day and just help God's kids. And my whole employment world turned around. It was the most amazing thing. It was what happened? You know that feeling that you have in your home group because you have a commitment there and you're greeting people and you're concerned. And I started to feel the same connectedness in the job that I felt in my AA group. Because I'm setting myself aside and serving a purpose greater than me, which is you. There's a lot of descriptions of lack of unity in the book. Page 52 is a great description of it, of what you could consider, some people would consider untreated alcoholism. It says we were having trouble with personal relationships. That might not be big in Florida. That's a big deal in Nevada, I'll tell you. If I get a call from a guy at 3 a.m, this is it. This is what it's about. It's not about... he's mad about they changed the TV night for his favorite show. We couldn't control our emotional natures. What's Silkworth say? That when we stop drinking, we become restless, irritable, and discontented. And I don't know how to. Do you ever catch yourself, and maybe when in your early sobriety, realizing you're angry and resentful and irritable? And say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to be that way anymore? How'd that work? Right. How'd that work? Yeah. Couldn't control my emotional nature. I can't just change like that. A prey to misery and depression. I like the word depression. More often in AA we use the word self-pity. I don't like the word self-pity. I like the word depression. Depression is the kind of word that if you suffered from depression and you drank again, the guys at the bar will go, of course you did. Let me buy you a drink. My God, you got clinical depression. They'll buy you a drink for that. They don't buy you nothing for self-pity. They'll give you medication for depression. They don't give you crap for self-pity. And it's such a sleazy, squirmy word. Do you ever have somebody come up sober when you're not doing well and say, Bob, you're feeling sorry for yourself. For about a minute, you're not anymore as you want to punch them, right? I hate that. Prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. 9 jobs, 4 years. It's funny how it's always their fault. We had a feeling of uselessness. Oh my God, that sense of in the 9th step promises. The wording is amazing, where it says that feeling of uselessness and self-pity. It will disappear. It doesn't say that feeling of uselessness and the feeling of self, like they're two separate things. They feed each other. They're connected. When you're useless, you're going to eventually feel sorry for yourself. Eventually. They're connected. That useless feeling I've had this most of my life, that feeling like, what's it all about, for God's sakes? What am I supposed to be when I grow up, if that's ever going to happen? And I live in a world, especially in AA, when I was new, old-timers, I had this love-hate relationship with most of them, and the love was, they were very kind to me and good to me, and I really appreciated that. And I wanted what they had, and yet resented them for having it. Do you know what I mean? The old-timers in AA looked as if they knew exactly who they were and exactly what they were about. Their life made sense. There was no spinning in their head as it is in mine, wondering, what do I do? Where do I go? Should I shop at Safeway, or maybe I should shop at Smith's or Lucky? I don't know. If I could figure out God's will, which one store I should go to, I'll probably get a better deal. And, crazy stuff. Right? They're not even concerned with that. They're just right as if they know exactly what their life's about, exactly who they are, because they do. They know that they're alcoholic. They've been given what is arguably, I think, the greatest blessing God would ever give His kids. This spiritual malady called alcoholism. I'll tell you why I think it's a blessing. Because without it, I would never be driven, shoved, and pushed into the life I have today. It is what has. It's a double-edged sword. It almost destroyed me and hurt a lot of people through me, and yet, with God's grace, it's the opposite. It's changed my life and helped a lot of people through me. Alcoholism really is, in God's hands, His greatest blessing. In my hands, bad deal. Bad deal. Feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. When it's all about me, and the world is all about me, there's a lot of crap to worry about. Man, I'm telling you. First of all, it's a planet full of people, and they're thinking something. And you don't know what it is, but you suspect it's about you. Or it might have to do with you, and you got to figure it out. I don't know if anybody else had this experience of getting sober and really just fighting the bottle, and feeling like you're eventually going to lose your mind. Like overwhelmed with such a degree of anxiety that I feel like my head's going to blow up. Full of fear. And this chased me well into sobriety. I rarely ever get this anymore unless I'm out of line somewhere and have something that needs to be corrected, which is sometimes fear. All this stuff is God's way of moving me. But in early sobriety, I used to wake up afraid. And I didn't even recognize it as fear. I would just wake up worrying about me. Wake up with an apprehension about what's going to be coming at me today. I was full of fear. We were unhappy. That's in Vision for You. It says that's why we drink again. It says he'll presently try the old game again. Why? Because he's not happy about his sobriety. And what happens to some of us is we go to meetings in AA, the discussion meetings, where everybody seems like they're doing well, so what do? We pretend. But as it talks about into action, sober, you can't survive living the double life. You can't survive putting out an image that everything's okay here and then going home and thinking about killing yourself. You can't survive that abyss between who you really are and who you want other people to think you are. You can't survive it. It's too much. God knows I know. Because I've been that guy in sobriety. The double life guy. Tough way to go. That is hell on earth. I remember my first year and a half of sobriety, I developed what what some would call a chronic gambling problem. I thought it was God was trying to make me rich and failing. But I would go out and gamble all my money and be broke, and I'm in debt, and I hate myself, and go to a meeting and put on my sober suit in the parking lot so I can go into the meeting and sound like a stellar example of AA. Tough way to go. I was unhappy. And it couldn't be of real help to other people, which connects back to the uselessness. The reason the people, the old-timers, are lit up is because they're helping others. There's a line in our book that says, an alcoholic properly armed with information about himself can be of use to another alcoholic where nobody else can. And these old-timers that I would see that are just lit up is because they're on fire. They got a purpose in their life that lights them up. Because even the worst things about them have become useful. There's nothing within them that is not right, that doesn't have a useful rightness about it. Even, some of you that are new here, the worst thing about you, the thing that you'll want to take to the grave, the thing you secretly have swept under the rug that you hate yourself for, you go through the steps, get involved in service, and I promise you, there'll come a day when you'll be delighted you had that experience. I'm telling you. Because you'll watch that experience turn another guy around. A guy that thought he was the only person on the planet that ever did that and was dying behind it. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Page 151 in the book, it says, we know a loneliness such as few do. And this is really the problem, is lack of unity. In Dr. Bob's last talk, he said a few things that he really encapsulated the essence and the spirit of the traditions in that talk. He talks about disunifying forces in AA. He talks about how we should never set ourselves apart as professionals. That we shouldn't even be concerned with the scientific stuff about the Freudian, your parents didn't treat you right, or all that self-analysis stuff. It's not our business. Our work here is to free ourselves of ourselves through helping other people and cleaning house. And he talks about gossip in there. He says the erring member and the tongue. I think that has the potential to be one of the most disunifying forces, not only in Alcoholics Anonymous, but in your family. Some of us were in families where nobody could talk to each other directly. So one member would talk to another member about you, right? And then that member talked to another member about you. And there's no connection, right? And then you don't feel like, and they're talking about you, so you don't want to be around them anymore. Or how many times in Alcoholics Anonymous that some guy will be out of line, maybe he has a gambling problem, or maybe he cheated on his wife, or maybe he's, I don't know, whatever the deal is, and it starts. And it's not kind stuff. It almost comes from a place of ego, as if the people talking about the person want to aggrandize themselves and feel like up here, looking down on that person. There is a line in our book. It says we do talk about each other quite a bit, but we always do it with the spirit of love and tolerance. Real tolerance. And Bill one time said in a letter, he said that honesty gets us to AA, but it is only tolerance that will keep us here. And real tolerance for some of us, guys like me, I didn't know what that was, and I started to learn it in step 4 as I went through the resentment section, and I started to change my perception of you by seeing myself in you and dismantling the judgment of you and realizing why am I mentally beating you up? That you're me. You're me on a bad day, but you're me. But maybe next week I really will be you. Right? It's the same thing that mechanics talk about when they talk about tolerances in engines. Your tolerance in an engine gets off, the engine will eventually blow up with friction because it's rubbing, the parts are rubbing each other, so they're irritating each other to a point of such kinetic energy the engine blows up. And so what a mechanic must do is take the engine apart, adjust the tolerances to allow the moving parts to move freely of each other so that there's no undue friction and enough kinetic energy to blow the engine up. And some of us know from a lack of tolerance, we blow up. Did you ever kick the dog because yesterday the cat scratched you? Right? That's the kind of guy I can be. I'm capable of all that. Capable of all of that. And this gossip thing in Alcoholics Anonymous is very brutal. I know a guy that left AA because of gossip. And it wasn't kind, and he had a situation in his family that was very painful for him. And there were people talking out the side of their neck about him, and he kept getting back to him. And sometimes well-meaning people in AA, because they're knuckleheads, don't realize what they're doing when they come to you and tell you what so-and-so said about you. That's not information you need. Right? And why are they telling that? Why are they telling you that? Because there's a sense of power in having the information. A sense it's self-grandizing. I got the good dope. Here's what happened. Did you know he said that about you? And you can almost feel them puffing up because they're the guy with the information. But it doesn't do any good. That does sometimes almost as much harm as the guy that's talking the crap. Right? And people leave here because of that. I pray to God that I would never do anything that would make people leave Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the great things about the traditions is they protect us from ourselves. Protect Alcoholics Anonymous from ourselves. Tradition number 2 really tells you who's in charge. For this, it's a funny. AA is a funny place. This is for a group purpose. There is but one ultimate authority. Only one. But one. There's only one. A loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. AA is the only place I know of where if a new guy comes, as most new guys come and do what I do, you want to find... I got my first sponsor because I thought he was in charge of AA. He was a past delegate, he was conference chairman, he sponsored a lot of guys. Because what do you do when you're new and you're awkward, you don't fit? You try to figure out who's got the juice, right? Who's in charge? And if a new guy tries to ask you, comes to somebody and says, who's in charge? Well, God. Yeah, I know. Who's really in charge? God? No, come on. I mean, who runs the deal? Who's the top dog? Oh, the top dog. Well, the guy cleaning the bathroom? Not the speaker. No, the speaker. He's just so self-centered. We just let him stand up there and ramble about himself. The guy cleaning the bathroom? Because our leaders are but trusted servants. A is the only place on the planet where you come in a big shot and work your way up to servant. Everywhere else, the other way around. Everywhere else, you come in a servant, you sweep the floors, and maybe someday I'll be a vice president. AA, we all come in big shots. And if we're lucky, we work ourselves up to servant. Because our growth here is always about reduction. It's never about accumulation. It's always about reduction. The problem is I come here with too much of me. I got what Tebow used to say, ego reduction at depth. At depth. How do I access the boss? through the group conscience. What's the group conscience? Well, in business meetings, there's that aspect of it. But I don't know about you guys. I bet you on the square at least 1,000 times since I've been sober, God has talked to me through a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least 1,000 times. When I'm distraught and separate and apart from and confused and worried and scared, and I'll go to a meeting and there'll be somebody saying exactly. And you have exactly what I need to hear. And in order to access the ultimate authority, you have to stay a part of. You have to stay connected here in order to access God's grace. Because I don't know about you guys, when I'm in trouble, I can't access God directly. Wouldn't that be nice? Then I'd never need you. But I can't. I get too much of me between me and God. If you've ever tried to do meditation when you're nuts, don't have any sharp objects around, man. Oh, it's not good. I can't. I don't meditate. I think. And we're gonna break here in about 5 or 10 minutes. And the reason we're going to break is there's a spiritual principle that the mind can't absorb what the butt can't endure. So I want to say that to give some of you hope, with the ones that are looking at their watch. If I hear any more about the traditions, I'm going to hang myself. I know most of you can run to the beach in the break. It's a good chance, a good opportunity. Tradition number 3 really defines our membership requirements. In the original long form was very, very different than the short form. And this is my opinion, which doesn't mean anything really, but I suspect that AA took a hit when we went from the long form to the short form. And I don't know. That's only one perception. Another perception of the same thing is, we didn't take a hit. We broadened everything. Now we got all kinds of people in here. Anybody that just figures, anybody gets a DUI is welcome. Anybody that somebody says, you drink too much and they quit drinking, they can come to AA. But in the original membership requirement, in the long form, it said membership should include all who suffer from alcoholism. And then they eventually changed that to a desire not to drink. Well, I don't know. This is, in my mind, there's a big difference between suffering from alcoholism and having a desire not to drink. My sister could be a member of AA. She has a desire not to drink right now because she's trying to lose some weight. But if she could succeed in her desire, what she's given up is 1.5 glasses of wine occasionally. I mean, but she's got a sincere desire not to drink. But when she quits the 1.5 glasses of wine, she don't suffer from alcoholism. I am a member, an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because my alcoholism starts and becomes more painful where the bottle ends. That's why I need you. If that wasn't true, why would I come here? Maybe for social reasons, I suppose. AA could be like the sober Elks. But I ain't right. When I'm not drinking, I ain't right. When the medicine don't work no more, I ain't right. And that's why I need Alcoholics Anonymous. I suffer from alcoholism. I'm the guy who can't quit entirely because of it. It talks about on page 44. I am not the hard problem drinker. I'm the real alcoholic. But the Spirit, it goes on to talk about this open door spirit. Hence we may refuse none who wish to recover from alcoholism. We have a thing that's in contention today at times in Alcoholics Anonymous, the singleness of purpose. And I've sat in meetings where it's debated, and I sense that we miss the point. That singleness of purpose is not designed to exclude anyone per se. Because anyone who wants to call themselves an alcoholic, even if they're not, has a right to be here. I mean, there's no police. I mean, a couple guys in black uniforms don't come to your apartment in the middle of the night to give you a blood test to see if you're really alcoholic. I mean, you want to say you're alcoholic. But it's an encouragement for a couple things to keep the real alcoholics here. And what happens is if you go to a group that is dominated by people other than alcoholics, and their discussions might be about drugs primarily, which is a lot of alcoholics have that experience in their stories. It doesn't mean that they have alcoholism, but they're alcoholic. You can be alcoholic and a lot of stuff. You can be alcoholic and choke little baby chickens' necks. It doesn't matter. Do you have alcoholism? But if you go to groups where consistently they're talking about their chocolate cake problem or their gambling problem, or there was a couple of years ago, I could have dominated 20 minutes of a meeting with my anxiety over and my addiction to the stock market. And what happens if you go to meetings like that? You don't want to go anymore. I mean, it's useful and it's kind of intellectually stimulating. Oh, I didn't know anything about the stock market until I went to that meeting. Wow, that's really cool. It's time for that meeting again. Boy, there's something really good on TV. I lose my desire to go because it doesn't feed me. We always want, the common welfare should always come first. I want Alcoholics Anonymous to always feed me and feed my spirit. And everybody in this room, I bet you everybody in this room has gone to meetings that lit you up and gone to meetings that when you came out of the meeting, you needed a meeting. Right? Everybody has that experience. And do you ever try to look at the difference between the two? It usually has something to do with the traditions. Usually. Let's take a 12-minute and 37-second break. I'll reiterate an announcement that was made by Chuck at the very beginning about the cell phones. And I want to tell you something. Especially if you're new, you probably don't get this. We're not trying to tell you what to do. We've been here a long time, and we know how God works. God has a bizarre sense of humor. If you leave your cell phone on, you can bet He will have some knucklehead call you in the middle of the meeting. Everybody around you would turn and look at you, and you will not hear anything else the rest of the meeting because you're having conversations in your head with the people that looked at you. So just save yourself a lot of grief and shut it off. I mean, but do what you want. But if it goes off and you miss a big chunk of the meeting, it's not our fault. I want to talk a little bit about this unifying force of gossip in AA. I know from taking my own inventory why I gossip is to try to elevate myself because I don't really feel that good about myself. Do you ever notice when you're really okay with yourself, what other people are doing it's nothing. It's nothing. But on a bad spiritual hair day, that's when the noticer comes on. I was up in I lived up in Maine for a while. It was one of my better geographics. I was up there, and I had a job for a while working on a lobster boat as a stern man. It was a tough, hard way to make a living, but fun, interesting. And we used to pull traps, lobster traps. And my first day on this lobster boat, we're pulling these traps, and there's crabs in the traps, which is not uncommon. And the lobster guys don't want the crabs. So they got this big bucket on the deck of the ship. It's about this high, about this big around, and they just throw the crabs, pull them out of the traps, just throw them the crabs, and they set the lobsters aside. Well, I'm standing there, and I'm looking at this crab bucket, and it's got several hundred crabs in it. They're just about to overflow, and they're climbing out, and they're going to, any minute, in about a minute, they're going to be all over the deck. And I'm a little concerned about this, because, well, first, they're a little creepy, the way, and so I tell this guy that on the boat, I said, you got to put a lid on that. He goes, no, we don't. I said, they're going to get out. He says, no, they won't. I said, look, right there. They're just about, that guy's just about ready to cut over the top. He said, no, they won't. He says, watch. And sure enough, just when a crab was about to break out, the other ones couldn't stand it. They'd reach up and they'd pull him down. He said, we never have to cover that. And sometimes a group in Alcoholics Anonymous that is permeated with a lot of untreated alcoholism is very much like a crab bucket. We'll just keep pulling each other down, pulling each other down. It's one of the most disunifying forces in Alcoholics Anonymous. Tradition 4, this is really where the traditions get interesting. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. Now, in the long form, it gets very specific about the trustees and etc. But in the spirit, and I'm more into the spirit of the traditions. The application of them within the fellowship is essential to our survival. But I am one who believes if you get the spirit of something, the application is very simple and it's like it's automatic. This is the tradition where the principle from Shakespeare that is on our coins, to thine own self be true, meets and merges with the other-centeredness of consideration. Autonomy in Alcoholics Anonymous brings us much freedom, and freedom brings much responsibility. Freedom without responsibility is kind of self-will run riot. Because with the freedom, there should be a consciousness of how our actions affect others. I think that one of the things that happens in most of us as we progress along, grow along spiritual lines, is we start to think outside the box of ourselves. In other words, how does my behavior, what does it speak to the newer people? Everything I do in Alcoholics Anonymous is essentially my vote for how I think everybody should conduct themselves. And you only get one vote. And it's not what you say, it's really your actions. If I want to cross-talk in a meeting or gossip with the guy next to me while someone's sharing in a meeting, then aren't I really saying that I think everybody should do that? Now, the inherent thing in alcoholics of my type is we think we're above the rules. I think the rules should apply for you. But essentially, if equanimity is here, if we are a program of equals, and we all have equal rights here, then what I do is really my vote for how I think people should conduct themselves in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I don't put any money in the basket, aren't I really saying I don't think anybody should? Maybe AA should dissolve. If I come late to a meeting and sort of disruptive as I come in, aren't I really saying I think everybody should be late for meetings? And I think as my consciousness starts to expand, as I start to get it, there's no punitive measures in Alcoholics Anonymous. There is spiritual growth, and as I grow spiritually, I grow away and outside and above myself. I start to wake up to what are my actions speaking here. And I'll tell you something. You think you start waking up to that, you start changing some of your behavior, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I have changed stuff in my life that I got to tell you, I would have never changed if it was just me. But I came I came to the table in step 6 with a willingness because I didn't want to be a bad example.